So Homer, just to get a little background here, I'm curious. Tell me what it was like growing up in West Virginia post World War II.
Right. Well, I lived in Colwood was like a pure company town. There were a lot of company towns during that era, the 1950s and before in the 40s. And that was basically these towns would grow up around one industry. There were a lot of mill towns. Huntsville was once a mill town, textile town. And so there's still old houses that were built around the plant. And so Colwood was like that. It was pure company town. Everybody that lived in the town worked for the coal mine, and the houses that we lived in were owned by the coal mine, and the store was owned by the coal mine. And so it was really just a very tight town. In that you knew everybody, you grew up with everybody, went to school with everybody, that you knew, and so it was an interesting place to grow up. Of course, none of us could really compare it to anywhere else because we hadn't grown up anywhere else. And in a lot of ways, it was a great place to grow up. I mean, the kids, we had a lot of freedom. On the other hand, we saw our dads leave every day to go down to a deep, dark, dirty coal mine. There were accidents up there. There was a lot of coal dirt in the air all the time. It was dirty everywhere. And the wives who invariably stayed home, that's what they did all day, was try to clean up all that coal dust that was everywhere.
So, most people probably know you from the movie October Sky. Um, we've been super fascinated by the fact that October Sky is an anagram for Rocket Boys. I'd love to. Did Quentin pick that on purpose? How did who first noticed that?
Joe Johnston, the director of the movie.
Really,
Yeah.
not till 1990s.
Yeah, no, I hated that title. I told him I'll never have anything to do with a movie called October Sky because if you're an author and somebody's going to make a movie based on your book, you really kind of want them to have the wrong title, or you're going to have to go through your life like I do and say, I wrote Rocket Boys, October Sky. And they also felt that after a while, after they had some test audiences, that Rocket Boys people would just think it was for
little kids,
young males.
Yep.
And so they wanted to kind of dress it up a little bit. And so they tried everything. And I was against, it all. But Joe Johnston, playing with his computer, put in an anagram software, and out popped October Sky. And he went bazinga, that's perfect.
Yeah, we put this together the other last night. And it's crazy to just watch it come together,
I know. Well, you know what? After a while, I just accept it. And in fact, it's really kismet. It's like, well, this is something that was just meant to be. I've learned to live with it. I mean, there are just so many things about the book and the movie that just were meant to be, that was out of my control. So I just have to look at it as almost a supernatural thing, really. So.
Right. I've never had the opportunity to talk to somebody that, a biography was made about them. I know, I realize it's off your own book, but is it really weird watching it on the movie and thinking, yeah, that's about what happened? Or how much of the movie do you look at it and you go, ugh, those Hollywood people?
No, I love the movie, and I was involved with its making. So when I watch it, which is really rare, I mean, I'm not one to go watch it over and over again. I'll watch it under special situations. I've worked with the Wounded Warriors a lot. I'm a Vietnam veteran, so they like to show the movie, and then I talk about it to the Vietnam vets, and we talk about recovery and perseverance and all that kind of stuff. But since I was on set so much, I really am reminded of what a great time that we had with it, and some of the challenges of filming it up there in Tennessee, and how awful the weather was. And how I didn't really appreciate. I was talking to another producer just yesterday, as a matter of fact, about another book of mine, and I didn't really understand that about the money involved. And the weather was so bad. If you look at the movie, most of it is filmed outside, and they have very few interiors. But they tried to, when the weather was bad and it would rain, it would snow, it would sleet, it would do everything. They started in February. It was supposed to be a 30-day shoot, and it turned into a 60-day and more shoot.
Wow.
And so when Laura Dern came, who's very expensive, she wanted to expand her role. And so I talked to her quite a bit. She'd call me up to her trailer while she's getting her hair fixed, and we'd talk about the Miss Riley role. And I'd go, oh yeah, it needs to be more Miss Riley in this movie. And the producers finally just basically told me to shut the what up. We can't afford Laura Dern anymore.
I gotta really say though, the Laura Dern role reminded me of a teacher that I had in high school rather. And I think that it's hopefully everybody has, a Miss Riley in their life.
Right.
How accurate was that relationship portrayed?
Yeah, well, Miss Riley was definitely our mentor. She wanted Big Creek was an athletic school. It was known for its prowess on the football field and the basketball court and all that. And but so we're looking right after Sputnik. All of a sudden, all of our academics changed across the country, and things got a lot harder almost immediately. But all the textbooks were changed. Focus was on science and engineering. And so Miss Riley, I think she was about 5 years older than we were, because she was also a Big Creek graduate, was a valedictorian there, went off to Concord, which is a university now, was a valedictorian there, but she came back to McDowell County to teach. So she was young and looking forward, and basically saying, we need to change this school. And so she just lanced onto us Rocket Boys as an idea that, hey, here's some kids that are doing something on their own, and that's what we call STEM now, that really we need to enhance. And so yeah, she was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful woman, and of course the fact that she came down with Hodgkin's disease during all of that but just, looking back on it, you just almost can't believe all that was going on in her life and our lives too at the time. So yeah, she was a great woman.
So let's get into the rocket stuff.
Yeah.
In the movie, it appears that, the news comes out about Sputnik, and then all of a sudden, young Homer Hickam wants to, make rockets. Did you have any interest in rockets before Sputnik?
No, I did not. So just in a general way, in that I'd read a lot of science fiction, read Heinlein and so on. So, we could all imagine ourselves as, didn't even have the term astronauts back then, but spacemen, and so I can imagine somebody else building the rockets, and maybe I'd get to ride on it to the moon and have an adventure and all that kind of thing. But actually building the rockets, no. But I really wasn't alone in that when Sputnik happened, for some reason, just across the country, there was a sudden interest in especially teenage boys, frankly, to build rockets because the United States was having trouble building rockets. And so we immediately just kind of put that together in our minds that if we ever wanted to get involved with this, then we better figure out how to build a rocket. So that's how it happened.
What's interesting is that Chris and I and Keenan know all of your life story, but our readership and our viewers do not. So we apologize if we're making you tell the same story 100 times over.
No, I don't mind. I go out. Give this speech a lot, of course, and sometimes I fall back into the routine of telling it, but I don't usually tell it to people who are interested in building rockets. So that's a different perspective, really. And so I often say that thank goodness Mr. Estes wasn't building rockets back then, because if he had, I'd have probably saved up for my newspaper route and ordered a rocket, and the story would not have been nearly as interesting, but that's probably what would have happened.
We talked about that yesterday. Chris, do you want to articulate that?
Yeah, we were absolutely talking about that. How much did the lack of resources motivate you to solve the problem? I know for myself, I love a good problem. I love having a good, challenge in front of me. And if it was just a matter of, opening up the instructions and, insert tab A into slot A, I'd get pretty bored. So how did that affect your motivation?
Yeah, well, I had built a lot of model airplanes, the old Rebel kits and so on. So yeah, I had been through that experience, just what you're talking about, tab A and slot B and so on. But I thought it was fun. It was fun to do that. It's pretty sloppy model maker, though, I have to say. But because I was always in a hurry to get it done, So yeah, it was. So how does a rocket work, and all of that. I really had no clue on that, but I could read some books on it. And Life magazine came out right after Sputnik. Life magazine came out with a big diagram of rockets with the fire coming out of one end and the pointy end on the other. And so, yeah, I kind
That's
of
the way I always describe it, don't I, John?
Yeah.
Okay, look, here's what we're gonna do. We got this
Right.
tube. We need a pointy end at the top. I need you to figure out how to get some fire out of the bottom. We're almost done with the rocket. Let's do this thing.
Exactly. So where does that lead you? So that there needs to be a hole in the bottom of fire coming out of it, and you got the pointy end, and somewhere there's a tube in between. So where does that lead you in your thinking process? What's going to burn inside that tube? And so that was the immediate mystery. After I'd resolved it in my head, I was going to build a rocket. Okay. So where do I go with that? And
you were how old at this time?
14.
14. Okay.
I was 14. I was in the 10th grade. I went to school a year early. They had a rule there in Colwood: if you could tie your shoes and go to the bathroom by yourself, you could go to school. But when I mastered at least one of those, Mom kicked me out of the house and sent me to school. So I was a year younger than everybody else in my class, pretty much. So anyway, immediately you look at those diagrams with in Life magazine, you see, well, liquid propellant, I don't know what to do with that. But the solid propellant that they had a picture of, is like, okay, I get that. That's easy. So what is that stuff? And that's where Quentin came in. Went to Quentin, and he immediately told me about, what's in fireworks, what did the Chinese use? It's black powder. So what's in black powder? And it's like, okay, potassium nitrate, saltpeter, right? Sulfur, charcoal. We can get all three of those at the company store. So it's just a matter.
Big mistake on the company's part.
So it all starts to come together in our heads. Where to get the tubing, where to get the nose cone, where to get the fins, and so on. Of course, everything in our heads was, well, the coal mine has everything, right? So I go to the coal mine, I go to the machinist up there, Mr. Bykovsky. He's a composite character, by the way, Mr. Bykovsky, but there were these machinists at the little machine shop by the coal mine that agreed to help me. And so we immediately start looking at, well, what kind of tube, something light, aluminum, right? And it's like, okay, so something at the bottom. Well, we could solder a washer there. It'll just fit, and then got a lathe, I can turn you out a nose cone and we'll glue it to the top, kind of thing. And then we'll load it with black powder. So that's kind of what, those were the steps that we were going through. But what percentage of saltpeter, what percentage of charcoal, what percentage of sulfur, we didn't have a clue. There wasn't anything, no book that we could find that really tell us that. So we would just start mixing up these combinations and set them alight and see which ones would burn the fastest and the brightest and that kind of thing. So that was we were basically just seat of the pants engineering. And of course, it turned out that it burns really hot, and your aluminum tube is going to melt, and your solder is going to melt, your nose cone is going to catch on fire. Of course, this is after I had blown up Mom's rose garden fence. I did that with that's why I went to Quentin, because I just used cherry bomb powder and packed that into a closed tube, and with no clue what would happen. inside of a flashlight. And well, you know, it's easy to make a bomb, but it's hard to do.
So you mentioned Quentin a couple times there. Was that, I'm just curious, there's the scene in October Sky where you first go to talk to him in the lunchroom, and it seems super awkward, and it seemed like, you know, you were labeling yourself as a social pariah by going and hanging out with, you know, this nerd. What was that accurately portrayed in the movie?
Well, you know, not quite, but Quentin was not a Colwood boy. He lived 2 mountains away in a little town called Bartley. So that was a little bit unusual that I was bringing him potentially into our group. He was also a little scary. Probably he'd be diagnosed with some form of autism now, and that he talked to himself a lot. He carried around this great big briefcase that he'd probably found in a garbage dump somewhere full of books. He wore just old ragged clothes. Same thing every day. But he made straight A's, and he was just super bright, but he was difficult to talk to. I mean, it was very difficult to have a conversation with Quentin. I just kind of felt like that Quentin might know something about this. And that's why, and once I did, I mean, he latched onto us as much as we latched onto him. He was just, without us realizing it, he was an outcast, and he was just kind of really desperate for friends. And we didn't really recognize that at the time. So he was good for us, and I guess we were good for him too.
So I love the fact that the science fair was so successful. It's like such a, you know, a Hollywood moment. I mean, yeah. If it was my life, I would have gotten a car accident on the way to the the science fair. Your story ended up much better. From that point, you know, that's kind of the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. What happened next?
Well, before I get into that, and what happens next is I go off to Virginia Tech to college, and then Vietnam, and then Army Missile Command, and then NASA, and all that is in the new book. Don't blow yourself up. But let me just say that the movie compresses everything, just like it all happens the same year, and so on. And that really didn't happen. And I was not interested in the science fairs at all when we started. We were just trying to figure out how to build a rocket. So we went through a lot of iterations in learning rocketry. And it was true that Miss Riley did bring us a book called Principles of the Guided Missile Design, which required math beyond what we had at the time, but we were willing to learn, that allowed us to design a sophisticated nozzle. And then, of course, all of that led to trying to figure out the specific impulse of our propellant, whatever it was, and just really getting into a lot of very sophisticated rocket design, solid propellant rocket design, including a core up to the middle, and then the different shapes and all of that kind of thing, and going through black powder, and then what we called rocket candy, which was potassium nitrate and sugar, which we melted, and then Zincoshine, the zinc dust, sulfur, and alcohol, final propellant that we use. So the science fair, I mean, it was a challenge, and we really just enjoyed doing this. And then the whole town got interested in it, and the whole thing with my dad was very true, that he thought I was wasting my time, that he wanted me to be a mining engineer. He didn't want me to work in the mine like they showed, but he wanted me to be a mining engineer. And so all of that happened during this time frame. And so the science fairs were really low on my list of something to do. And I really didn't care that much about it, but Miss Riley did. And so she was the one that really pushed us to go to the science fairs. She just wanted something to put in that big trophy case there at Big Creek that was other than athletics. And so it surprised us, frankly, that we won the county science fair. And then it surprised us that we won the state science fair. And it really surprised us when we got a gold medal at the national science fair. And I have to say that now, I don't think our our exhibit would win 10th place in even a local science fair, because it was kind of crude, but rockets were really, really in at that time. And so part of our success was that we were who we were from the coal fields, and that we were building rockets that were pretty sophisticated. So that gave us a little bit of leg up on some of the other science fair exhibits, and that made Miss Riley really happy, and my mom really happy, and that kind of thing. And as I write in the new book, I was so busy that I didn't even apply to college, except I did want to go to the Air Force Academy, but it turned out my eyes weren't good enough to go. So my mom actually applied for me to go to Virginia Tech. And she didn't tell me till later in that summer, after I was working in the gas station across the street, when she told me I was going to Virginia Tech. So that's the way that worked out. And down there, by the way, I built a cannon, a great big cannon called the Skipper. Which
yeah, I want to hear about Skipper. Tell us about Skipper.
That's next on our list. How did you know?
Well, I mean, you know, I was the rocket boy, right? And I knew something about blowing things up. So real quick, Virginia Tech used to be 100% military college. When I went there, it was. Well, I say 100%. I guess about 90% of the students were cadets. My brother, by the way, also went to Virginia Tech, but he was on a football scholarship, but so he didn't have to be in a cadet corps. Anyway, we played the Virginia Military Institute every year at Thanksgiving, and they had a little pop gun that they would drag out and fire it off, and then chant across the field, "Where is your cannon? Where is your cannon?" And that led me, and it's a similar story to October Sky, really. And I gathered in 3 other boys and cadets, and we decided we were going to build our own cannon. The administration said, no, you can't do it. So we did it anyway. We gathered everything that needed to build this thing. We actually did build it with the help of the industrial engineering department, which is why I graduated in industrial engineering and not aerospace engineering. And we built this huge brass cannon. And in the Thanksgiving Day game of 1963, like I said, Virginia Tech administration didn't even know about it either. The VMI cadets marched in, they fired their little cannon, goes, "Where's your cannon? Where's your cannon?" And we hauled out this gigantic cannon, and I put a double charge in it, and it created a shockwave when across the field, cracked the glass in the press box on the other side, and then our cadet corps chanted, "Here's our cannon." Here's our cannon. And actually, I had no idea that none of us had an idea that the cannon would be embraced like it was by successive generations of not only the cadets there, but also the administration, and it became an icon.
There's an important passage in the book where you said what you said to your dad, that none of your brass is in the cannon.
Yeah, that's kind of an unfortunate part that I needed to include in the and I regretted the rest of my life in that story. In that my dad, very much like he had done with the Rocket Boys, it's like surreptitiously would help us and leave steel tubing on the porch and take a blind eye to what the machinists were doing to help us build these rockets. And he drove through the night to bring me brass to make this cannon with when he heard that we were doing it. They had a lot of old brass gears and so on that they would just throw away at the coal mine. And I don't know. So I was so irritated at my dad about just adoring my brother so much. They were really at the game to watch my brother play football and not watch what I was doing. I told him none of his brass was in that cannon. And that wasn't true. And I regretted that to the day I died, that I disappointed him in that way. But, you know, that's the father-son story, the tension that we have that runs through, I guess, all of my stories about Coalwood, the tension between father and son. So, by the way, before we get too far, I do have the only remaining artifact of the Rocket Boys day. Would you like to see it?
Absolutely.
Of course.
All right. It's a rocket nozzle. I think it was, I want to say 28, 29, something like that. And so this is the only thing that I have left from those days. It's an obviously very over-engineered nozzle. This is a tubing. It's 1/8 inch thick steel tubing, and inside you can see, well, you can see the bolts all the way around that hold this nozzle in, and so there is that's the base of it, which fits up inside the tube, and so this is where the fire is coming out, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's a little burned in there, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And here's the other side. And so this was one of the really big problems that we had with zinc dust and sulfur, was it eroded, even though this is made out of very high carbon steel, the best that we could get, it eroded the nozzle and the throat. And so this throat, it looks pretty round, but a lot of times that we would get the nozzle back and find it irregularly shaped. Zinc dust sulfur rockets are not very efficient. A lot of the propellant, raw propellant, is actually just pushed out through the nozzle, and so it erodes everything. And so part of the, I don't know if you can see it or not, but part of we lined the interior as best we could with Durham's rock hard water putty. So we actually put a ceramic in there, and this one, it seemed to work pretty well to keep all that erosion from occurring, but we never really solved the erosion problem. And that really irritated me and Quentin, primarily because what we wanted to do was to design and launch a rocket that did pretty much exactly what we had designed it to do, and so if the nozzle erodes, then we're not going to get that. And so we never really solved that erosion problem, but we gave it a shot.
Great story. And the math from that came from that book that Miss Riley gave you?
Right. And so we came up with a number of different variety of ways of determining the specific impulse of zinc dust sulfur that had been had alcohol as a binder, compressing it, but it probably wasn't that accurate. So
when did you learn about ammonium perchlorate?
I'm sorry?
When did you learn about ammonium perchlorate?
Not till I worked for Thiocol for about a year.
Thiocol, yeah. And I live in Las Vegas, where we had the big explosion.
Yeah, it's pretty volatile stuff. I watched it mixed there at the Brigham City plant in Utah.
Yeah.
With aluminum dust.
Yep.
And
we pour our own here in Las Vegas. Mix our own.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I mean, I've seen, I only worked for Thiocol. I had a break in service. When I came back from Vietnam, I was actually ended up having to have some surgery done as a result of a little explosion I got involved with over there. And so I got out of the service for a little while and went off to Utah and worked for Thiocol.
Was that before or after scuba diving?
Before.
Before, okay.
Yeah, I started scuba diving in the early 70s. So this would have been 1969 or so. But I was assigned to a reserve unit, and that reserve unit got called up for Vietnam. So I just got back from there. So I prepared them to go to Vietnam, and then, but I was put back on active duty. So they sent me, and again, it's like all this stuff is kind of supernatural, meant to be. The Army, in its wisdom, sent me to Redstone Arsenal here in Huntsville, is where I got to know, assigned to the Army Missile Command, and got to know folks there, which ultimately led me to live here, and then ultimately to work for NASA. So it's just like something that was meant to be. But I remember my wife, Linda's father, worked for Thiocol here in Huntsville, and he would bring home the propellant and for like 4th of July or New Year's, and burn it out in the yard. And he had retired by the time I got to know him, but he still had some of that stuff, and it was really amazing stuff. And it's sitting right now, I guess, in it's the great big SRBs that attached to the SLS, and hopefully it hasn't cracked. It's been, I think they loaded it about 2 years ago. So we should see, right?
Yeah.
So Homer, I apologize. I don't know exactly what year this was, but John tells me there's a great story about a Porsche 912.
Yeah, well, so
I wore
after
my
I went to combat engineering OCS at Fort Belvoir, I was shipped off to Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, and I can't talk about what we did there, but I can talk about that I was a young bachelor desperate for female companionship and 2 hours away was Brigham Young University. And so I would go over there. I took night classes just to meet people, young people my age. And I met a really nice Mormon girl over there. And I, try to figure out where to take her on dates and so on. And so I really liked the MGB, and I wanted to go up to Salt Lake City and look at the MGB in the showroom. And she went with me, and they also sold Porsches there. And she saw this Porsche 912, and it's like a 911. It's got a smaller engine in it.
4-cylinder, yeah.
4-cylinder rather than 6. Beautiful car. She got in it and would hardly get out of it. And I knew that if I ever going to have a chance with this girl in any way, I needed to buy that Porsche. And so I did. I ultimately lost the girl, but I kept the Porsche. So.
Do you still have it?
No, I sold it some years ago. I traded it in. I brought it while I was in Vietnam. I put it in storage, and then I brought it back here to Huntsville and put about 110,000 miles on it. That's when I got into scuba diving, and carrying a bunch of scuba tanks in the back of that Porsche didn't make a lot of sense. So I sold it and bought a Volkswagen bus.
I used to sell 912s and 911s, and so I know that car very, very well. And the 912 is appreciated very nicely in value. They're quite rare.
Yeah. Yeah, I did love that car, and it seemed to have plenty of pep. I don't know if I'd had 6 cylinders, I probably would have killed myself.
You say in the book that was like 3/4 of your monthly pay or something back then.
Yeah, it was $137.50 a month. I still remember exactly what it was, and it was $5,000 to buy that 912, and I was making like, I don't know, $240 a month as a lieutenant in the Army. So
I think Porsches are a little bit more expensive these days.
Are they really? Okay.
Pretty sure. I mean, I'm no expert.
Yeah,
they're great cars. Good German engineering there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm driving a Porsche now, Cayenne.
Oh, terrific. Yeah,
great car. There's some great stories in the book. I'm really enjoying it. One day I'm already halfway finished, and I'll finish it today and tomorrow. I'm sure it's a great story.
Well, thank you, John. I really do appreciate the amateur Rocketeers these days. People are always wondering if I still build them. I don't, for a variety of different reasons. I just feel like I've pushed my luck probably as far as I could go, but also. I'm on the board over at Space Camp, and they've named the rocket range over there after me, which is kind of nice. And all they have to do someday is, after I pass this, put memorial on it. It'd be perfect. It's all good. But so I see a lot of Estes rockets being built and launched, and Estes style rockets being built and launched, and it's really kind of cool. So I don't lack for seeing rockets being launched. But I was Linda and I were invited over to Australia for Thunder Down Under. Be careful looking that up. It's also a
oh yeah I do. We have that show in Vegas.
Yeah. But it was great to go down there and go out in the outback and hang out with a lot of folks from United States, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, everywhere. And I was kind of reintroduced in a way to I mean, this is advanced. The stuff that you guys are doing, really advanced rocketry. I don't recall anybody had a zinc dust and sulfur rocket down there.
Well, why do you think it is that rocketry as a hobby is so limited? Like as a hobby, it's never really taken off. And I got to tell you, John and I are the same age. And the first time I went to John's house, which was late 2021, we were there for an unrelated thing. And he was always like slipping off into the garage. And I'd go find him out in the garage, and he's like sanding something or other. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm working on my rocket. I go, what? He goes, I'm working on a rocket. I go, what are you talking about? You're a grown man. And he goes, oh no, it's a big deal. And so like I had never heard of this as a hobby, whereas it's, dominated the last 30 years, 50 years of John's life. How is it that some people get more drawn to it than others?
Well, I think people who like to build rockets just like to build things. I suspect that almost everybody that's involved with really sophisticated amateur rocketry also likes battle bots on TV, right? The robots that beat each other up, and it's almost the same mindset. Is that you're out in the garage and you're trying to put something together, and you're working toward a goal. And that goal is fun. I mean, ultimately, you're working toward creating fun for yourself, I think. And so you're building this thing. All your gears have to be engaged. You have to be a sequential thinker. Whether you have gone to professional engineering school doesn't really matter. You become a sequential thinker because you can't miss a step in building a rocketry. So that keeps you totally engaged. And there's always a better way to make it. And you're just, while you're building one rocket, you're really looking to the next one and beyond. What am I going to learn with this rocket? So you're always learning, right? And so to me, it's just a very engaging thing to do. Again, I don't do it these days. I've been just so busy with other stuff, but I could see myself getting back into it, frankly, if Linda would let me have all the tools and everything that I needed out there. But I really enjoy being around people who do it now, and I relate to them. And again, I think we relate to people who, young people now who are building robots, and drones and so on. That's all the same mindset.
I like what you said about sequential thinking.
Yeah.
That's super important. Hey, John, I'm going to go out on a limb here. We have not rehearsing this. Homer, I don't know if you realize so our group, Garage Rocketeers, we have some near-term goals and we have some long-term goals. Our near-term goal is to build a 12x Estes payloader. So take every dimension on the Estes payloader rocket. That's the one that had the clear tube. Multiply it by 12. How big is that rocket going to be, Keenan?
21 feet tall.
21 feet with a diameter of just over a foot.
Yeah, so big. And then ultimately what we want to do is we want to break the Kármán line. And, honestly, nobody's a billionaire in this club. We're just a bunch of guys in our garage, like you mentioned. We would love to invite you to one or both of those launches. If it, I don't know how to make that happen, but it's going to be fun, and it would be really cool to have Homer Hickam there.
Well, it does sound like fun, and I'd love to come. And let's just see if our schedules will.
We'll bug you
up. Maybe you can get Kai Michelson to come too, because
we just interviewed Kai.
Oh, did you?
We just interviewed Kai, Chris and I. Yep.
Yeah, Kai's great. Let's see. About 6 months ago, I get a call from Buddy, his son.
I know Buddy very well. I know Buddy.
He said, we're in Huntsville, and I go, oh, that's cool. I said, we want to come by your house, and I went, okay, and we're towing something that you might be interested in. And okay, so they come to my house towing this Volkswagen Beetle that had been redesigned into a rocket. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not.
I've seen the pictures, yeah.
And the neighbors are all rolling their eyes. It's like, oh God, Hickam, what next? So. And Kai, by the way, built the Miss Riley rocket that was used in the October Sky. He didn't build the other ones. That was built by Joe Giordano, who was the special effects guy. And they were just like Estes style rockets for the most part. But he built that one. And I did a big favor for Kai right after about a year after the movie came out, I got this request from Junkyard Wars.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember that or not. And they wanted me to come to England and be on
Yeah.
their show because they were going to build rockets. And I went, I don't want to do that. And I was stupid because I'd never seen the show. And I said, you should get hold of Kai Michelson. And they did. And Kai got that free trip over to the UK to be on Junkyard Wars. And then I saw the show and I went, oh, crap. I would have really enjoyed doing that. But anyway, so yeah, Kai and I've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, you and I met at Tripoli LDRS in Amarillo, Texas. So the Gates brothers, Dirk and Dirk and his brother Eric Gates and I and my brother owned Rocket Silo. You came by our booth and we had a nice conversation.
Homer, what would you say to kids today about this new space race that's going on to inspire them to some of that sequential thinking that you've talked about?
Yeah, well, of course, we have SpaceX, we have Blue Origin, we have ULA, we have a lot of these dynamic new companies. What I'd kind of like to see is that for young engineers go to work for these flexible, dynamic young companies like SpaceX, and then maybe graduate to NASA, in that they will then have the experience to really monitor what these other companies are doing. So right now we don't have that. We've got a bad mix and match. We've got really young people at NASA that don't have the experience trying to keep track of what companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are doing. And so that's kind of a bad mix that we've got right now. I think that NASA will evolve into a more mature organization that primarily monitors what these other companies are doing in the chemical rocket business, and then maybe also going into advanced like nuclear propulsion and so on. So yeah, it's a very, very exciting time right now. This is the second golden age of space flight, I think, as long as we can just keep it going. And so it's.
And you're getting more calls now probably than ever before.
Oh well, yeah, I do, but. I kind of walk a tightrope on all that. I don't want to be critical of what other people are doing. I don't want to necessarily be that SpaceX guy, that just is thrilled at what Elon is doing. But I met Elon in Space Camp, like I want to say 2001. He had just sold PayPal, so he wasn't a kid, but he came to adult Space Camp, and I met him, and him and the other men that were in his team, they were all entrepreneurs that came, and he was talking about a company then. And then when I heard he was out in Quaj, I sent him emails encouraging him and that kind of thing. So, and Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos said he started it after he watched the movie October Sky.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm waiting for my ride on the New Shepard, by the way.
That'd be great.
So
I wish it would come.
Shatner went. You should be able to go.
Absolutely.
Really? I mean, come on.
So my question to you, and I totally understand if you don't want to get into this, but Blue Origin, let's not forget Virgin, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin. Who do you think has the best design
of a suborbital rocket?
Yeah,
Blue Origin, no question.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
it's a very safe, well-designed rocket. It has a number of safeguards to it. I mean, again, if somebody's going to offer me a ride, if all of them offer, well, of course, SpaceX, they don't have a suborbital rocket, so that doesn't really count. So we're just talking about the two. And Virgin Galactic, they've had a lot of trouble with that system. I think it's safe, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's as safe and as reliable as the Blue Origin design.
So do you think Elon's design is going to be successful?
Of a Starship?
Yeah.
Well, knowing Elon, yes. I do worry about having all of those engines that all have to work at the same time.
What are we up to now?
That a certain percentage of them cannot
I think the booster is like 27 or 31 engines now or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at the Soviet Union's N-1 rocket, to me, that kind of is similar. um, and they had a lot of trouble with that rocket. But I never discount anything that Elon is doing. He really has some very sharp people working for him, and I presume they've taken that into account, that a certain maybe percentage of those engines are not going to work. They could shut them down, and burn the others a little bit longer, and they can still do it. I mean, it's just really remarkable. I don't have much interest in going down and watching SLS launch. I don't know why. I've seen a number of shuttle launches, but I would really love to go down and see a Starship.
Me too.
And I think it'd be a lot of fun, no matter what happens, because it's really cool. If they, have a rud right on the pad, or 100 feet in the air, or 1,000 miles, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, we learned a lot. Here we go. We just got another one.
Right.
Roll it out. I just really, I would love to see that. And I actually went down to McGregor when they were first starting to build or test engines down there. And I'm no prognosticator. I'm no better than anybody else. I didn't really get what all that Elon was doing, because I'd seen a number of startup rocket companies come and go, and I just didn't realize the really, really, really good people that Elon had hired.
Right.
And then also that he was the type of boss that was going to allow them to get out there and experiment and fail and
there's a great clip. I don't know if you've seen it, where Elon is being interviewed by some YouTuber, and he's at space, Starbase, whatever it's called. And the guy asks him a question, and pardon me, I'm not intelligent enough to understand the context of the question. But the YouTuber asks Elon kind of off the cuff, well, why don't you do one of those back check sort of something valves on the main booster? And there's a moment in the clip where Elon goes, well, that's really a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I think we're going to have to do that. And then they recap it. And apparently he redesigned something to take into account this sort of off the cuff comment that the YouTuber had. And I think that that's part of what makes Elon successful, is that he's not above listening to some kid from YouTube,
Yeah, no, really. I think you're onto something there, Chris. Just consider, what if somebody would say that to a NASA engineer, or you hardly ever get to talk to NASA.
It's okay, kid. It's okay, kid. We got this. We're NASA.
Right.
We know what we're doing.
Talk to manager, and he'd basically say, well, I'm so glad that we're inspiring you to think like that, and then just slough you off. Hopefully, Elon is like part of the engineering team. And so we don't see that with Bezos, and we don't see that with Branson. They're not part of the engineering team. They're basically the money men that, and they're doing all that's necessary to gather the team together. So we don't see them that often, and we don't get to talk to them that often. And we're not sure that they would know the answer to a engineering technical question. But Elon, we can pretty well trust it. He knows everything about that rocket. And again, it's like, okay, so I never thought that I would live to see the day when a rocket a booster would take off and land. To me, that still boggles my brain when I see that. NASA would have never done that. Never. Right. Not that they're not capable of doing it, but they have
money to burn, right?
To tell Congress that we're going to do that, and then actually do it and take that risk, they're just not going to do it.
I love that. There's one clip where the two boosters come in side by side, and the Falcon Heavy. It's just magical, isn't it?
It's crazy. And so you say you're going to catch this huge stainless steel boost with a pair of chopsticks. It's like, okay. God bless you, bless your heart. But I just don't put it past them that they're going to be able to do this. I think they'll have, what they're talking about, again, almost everything about Starship's never been done before, including going up and having a depot where they're going to reload the propellant, the fuel, and nobody's ever done anything like that before. So there are a lot of steps when they talk about using the Starship as the human landing system. I look at that and I go, it's not going to be that easy. There's so many steps now to land an astronaut on the moon compared to what it was for Apollo. And it's going to take a long time to make this whole hodgepodge of systems work together, if they ever do. But I'm just glad that they're trying. And
sequential thinking.
I guess we'll get there. Again, sequential thinking. Sometimes, though, you look at it and it's like, okay, we could do this in 4 steps, or we can do it in 40 steps. Which one's probably better? Sometimes 40 would be better. But we shall see. But it's fun to watch. And again, I'm encouraged by all the young people that are involved. I go over to Space Camp. Again, I'm on the board there, and I see all these young people who are really just great young people who, we don't just teach them about space and rockets over there. It's really a lot of team building that goes on, and they learn to be leaders. And we talk about maybe not in those terms, but we do get them to start thinking about sequential thinking. If you do A, then B must follow. If you skip B, C doesn't necessarily follow. You might luck out, but and so they start thinking in those terms, and that is a way, actually, at that age, that the brain is developed. They're in a developing situation. So if you never, and that's why math is so good. People go, I'll never use calculus. Well, maybe not, but it's teaching your brain way to think. It's giving you this this idea, actually redesigning your whole cortex there in a lot of ways, to think in terms of consequences and results of going through sophisticated type of thinking that's maybe not something that you think about every day. So yes, you may never use calculus, but it's good for your brain. And
it also might keep you out of jail, from the movie. Hey, Homer, tell people, as we wrap up here, why don't you tell us about your new book and pitch that for everybody?
Well, sure. The new book is Don't Blow Yourself Up, and that is the subtitle is the continuing travails and, well, gosh, I've forgotten the subtitle now. Anyway, it continues travails and adventures of the Rocket Boy of October Sky. So it is the 40 years after going to the National Science Fair and what happened to that boy, and it basically just takes you through the decades afterwards, and you get a little bit of sense of American and world history, because I got involved with a lot of it. By Virginia Tech, of course, we talked about the skipper, but then also I was in the Vietnam War, I was involved with that, and then came back and started being a scuba instructor and trying to write and going through all of that, diving on World War II, German U-boats, and so I tell all that story. But at the same time, we're seeing this young man become a better engineer, working for the Army Missile Command, starting to do things with computers, and then ultimately working for NASA, and then going over to Japan and training the first Japanese astronauts, and working with wonderful astronauts like Kathy Sullivan, and being involved with the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission and all that kind of thing. So I really got to witness a lot of history during those 40 years before I wrote Rocket Boys, and they made that movie October Sky. And after that, my whole life changed. So I really end the book right there.
So I guess the real question is, who do we get to play you in the next movie?
Well, I mean, Jake could still do it, right?
Oh,
if we're talking about the young Homer.
Yeah, you're right.
We'll see. I don't, Hollywood has its ways and they're not ours, as we like to say. And who knows? I've been talking to some producers about the Coldwood Way being made into maybe a TV film and that kind of thing. Coldwood Way was the original sequel to Rocket Boys. I call it an equal. It actually takes place during the same time frame. It was a story that I took out of the original book about the Christmas in 1959, where a lot of different things happened. But it does include the Rocket Boys and some of the stuff that we were doing. So after all these years, I finally did get the rights returned to me for the Coldwood Way and all the sequels. And so now Hollywood is kind of interested again. But we'll see. Show me the money. kind of thing.
Well, Homer, thanks for talking with us. We really appreciate it. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to history. It's really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and don't blow yourself up. Right, we got this message. You should buy my book just for the cover. What's over here? And I know you're not going to, because you guys really know what you're doing. And I hope that, I'm sure that you are being mentors to young people coming up, and getting them all engaged. And it's a wonderful, you call it a hobby. It's, hobby is almost too light a term.
Agreed.
What you do. I'm not quite sure. We need to come up with a different term, but it is one that
it's a life passion.
A life passion. Yes, there you go. I like that. It's your passion. And so I like to talk about the 3 P's of success: passion, planning, and perseverance. And all those have to do with amateur rocketry, right? So you can go into that. And I'm really proud of what you're doing. And invite me out sometime. We'll see if we can mesh up. I think that would be a lot of fun. And I go out every summer to Montana to hunt dinosaurs. So I do head out west every so often. So
great.
I think we need to call one of the rockets the Hickam, John.
Nah, the Homer, mate. So you can get it home.
All right. Well, thanks for everything.
I just appreciate that thought, guys. But yeah.
Thank you, Homer. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. It's great. I love talking to you, and I'll tell the Rocket Boys that I talked to the Garage Rocketeers, and they'll be excited about that.
Fantastic.
So great.
Thank you.
Take care.